Todd, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Brianne, I am doing fantastic. And so thanks for having me on your podcast today.
You are quite welcome. I'm excited to talk to you. It's you do some things that I've never personally gone through with the techniques that you use, but I think it can be really helpful to a lot of people, especially athletes. So I'm excited to dive into just learn more about hypnosis, how it works, why it's beneficial, and all that fun stuff. But first off, let's just talk about you. Who are you?
Who am I? Well, I own Philly Hypnosis Performance, and since about 2000, I've been working on the mental game of business, sports, weight loss, stopping smoking. Really, if you think about everything we do physically, it all starts in your head. And, there's a connection between your head and your heart, but your body has to follow. So if you believe you can or you believe you can't, Henry Ford says you're right. And Proverbs 23 says, so a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So, getting the right thought process going, is probably 80% of the right game. And getting, and then once you get the thoughts right, it's easy for you to get yourself out of the way.
So true. So true. The mental side of things is amazing. Like the way I know me, I overthink everything, especially skills I struggle with. And like the way I can just get in my head is amazing and frustrating.
There is like a secondary gain with that. If you think about, some of the times where you have some apprehension. So let's take the second most feared thing next to death, and that's public speaking, right? So if anybody has ever had it, whether it's the sweats, the butterflies, to the vomiting, to passing out in extreme cases, your unconscious, which works probably about at the 7-8-year-old level, perceives something's wrong. So it's like being in your car, all the check engine lights come on, like it's too hot, low fuel, no oil, and they're indicators, right? And, it's good to pay attention to it. However, in your body, sometimes it's sort of a false indicator, right? Your heart is, going up. There's more respiration. You are a little bit excited. The butterflies are, flying, that way. However, given that speech could be advantageous to your career for a grade or some kind of performance and interview. So it's something that's needed, just like, I've seen some of the things and, been in CrossFit myself, going for your PRs, right? And taking it to the next level so that you can level up, right? So, it's a level of stress. And, in one sense, if you never do it, I always tell clients like, they're always, well, why do I feel this way? I go, well, your body's just sort of protecting you, right? Because if you don't subject yourself to it, you won't feel it, right? So, you know what I mean? If you don't look at the bar with, all those plates on it, you don't have to get your shoulders underneath it and lift it or, or grab a hold of it. It's that simple. However, part of, your plan, part of what you want to do or, your career or, some other advantage is there. And, you kind of contrast that being, the fear, phobia, the mental thing. But yet when there's an emergency, you hear stories of, of mothers that have gone out where their child's trapped under a 2,000-pound car and lifted it, with like one hand and grabbed their kid out. And, and we're struggling like, trying to, 200-pound, deadlift or something, So, there's some amazing things that can happen, when the brain and body work together versus, when we talk ourselves out of it.
So let's kind of dive into that. How do we, besides those emergency situations that like make us all function together, how do we, in normal situations, get ourselves or get that mind and body to work together?
Well, if you were to come in my office prior to COVID, before I had an office, now everything's virtual. I have a whiteboard, and on the top of the whiteboard, the first question is, what do you want? Then there's the line, and then it says what you don't want. And I'm going to bet probably 90% of the time, people come in and tell me what they don't want versus telling me what they want. So someone comes in, if it's weight loss, well, I don't want to be fat. I don't want to be overweight. I don't want to have a heart attack. I don't want, high cholesterol or diabetes or something. It's not what I asked. I asked, what do you want? You know, I would like to be, a size 10 at 140 pounds, and whatever the dimension or curves that you're looking to have, right? I mean, that's really what you want, right? This is the visual representation. This is the kinesthetic weight level of it, and type of thing. Or I don't want to fail in my deadlifts. You know what I mean? I don't want to get up in competition and get so nervous where my hands are so sweaty I can't grip the bar. No, I want to rip and grip. I want to grip and rip. You know what I mean? I want to grab that bar and bring it up like it's 20 pounds. That's really what you want, right? But that's not what you're thinking. On a very simple, and a very simple part, that's really to get people focused. And then the question is like, okay, how do we, just like, connecting, electronics together, plugging cables in, your brain and the neural networks, how do we then bring those things together? Because it's really a belief structure that's there. But the biggest thing is really fleshing out people, because once they start to see like, what do I want? Now, all of a sudden, the destination's really clear. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's really the fundamentals of it. Then around it, there's a lot of other things to do is, to help people get into the zone, in performing the zone and understand how to manage mistakes in some different areas, depending on the sport that they're doing. There's different variables that come in, to it. But that's really the question, because most people spend so much time thinking about what they don't want. And I have to think, have them flip over in their thought process. And if that's the first thought that comes up, what's the mirror opposite reverse of that? So that they can, maybe I say, look, write all these things down and then ask, do I really want that? No. Well, what do you want? Then it's easy to kind of get the opposite and come over here. And like, okay, how much are you focusing and what's the strategy? What do we got to do to repeat this, and make this, much more manageable and, much more in the zone.
Okay.
Is that making sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And it makes me wonder, is there a reason that so many of us focus on that what I don't want versus what I want? Are we somehow conditioned to think in that negative way versus the positive?
I don't, when I talk to clients and that usually comes up like, is that positive? Is that negative? I really don't care. You know what I mean? I look at it as, what do you want? What do you don't want? Right. I got a list of what I don't want, and I got to focus so that this becomes the wind in my sail to get me over here, to what I'm doing in that part. I'll give you an example. For the London Olympic Games, I worked with a gentleman named Khadivas Robinson. I think he was 34 years old, ran the 800 meters, right? At the time, he was UNLV women's track coach. And so I was sort of his mental coach coming into those games. And if you looked at most 800 meters, they're typically, people coming right out of college because they're running that way. And one of the things that he and I worked on was race day. And he would show up at a race and he would get, an hour before, the typical butterflies. They could be cramps, they could be upset stomach, could be vomiting, could be a variety, headache, different things. Would typically get in the block still. However, the consistency wasn't there in having good time splits. So if you think about like the two ends of the spectrum, the one end of the spectrum over here would be like, hey, Khadivas, like, what if we cut off all the anxiety? Like, what if I showed you how to just eliminate that? And, first it was cool, but someone who's kind of grown up with it, I imagine he probably learned it from his coaches or his parents or somebody that, hey, this is nervous. This is, whatever kind of the behavior you should have there. It really becomes a foreign subject. Really, really difficult to go there. I said, all right, so then let's utilize it. So, it's one of the things that I use in my mindfulness and hypnosis is how do I utilize all the stuff around me to help me, focus in. So I said, look, so you're there. I said, why are you at a race? And, we finally got it down. I'm there to run. Right. So, you're at a race because your stomach's upset. You got a headache. Your body's tightening up. Right. So why are you there? I'm there to run. And I said, how do you want to run? I want to run fast, right? And if I run fast, what happens? I generally win, right? So now all of a sudden, what we did in the neural connection is we went from, all the physical signs that you would say are negative, means I'm there at a race, I'm there to run, I'm going to run fast, I'm going to be, and I'm going to win. And he went from, what he was doing to some consistency to being the number 2 person on the U.S. Olympic team at London. Okay. So the question is there's a number of ways, but if the two ends of the extreme are of like, hey, I can show you how to eliminate it. And some people that works really easier. And other people, how do we take it and we utilize it? You know what I mean? So, it just, you'll have someone like a gymnast and you'll go out and if you watch it, it's like a 4-ring circus. You've got high bars, you've got, the jump, you've got the bars, you've got the floor, and there's music and there's stuff going on. So, I mean, if you were in the gym practicing in the quiet, it would be one thing, but you've got all this commotion going on, at one time. So being able to help all that noise only helps you to focus in as if you were just alone on the beam, as if we could put a bubble around you. Some people, that's a great way is to imagine I just encased you in bubble and all that stuff just disappeared. Other people, there's other ways to, to do it, because sometimes if that bubble gets popped by somebody, which is one of the things as far as when I teach competitors, I don't have to be better than you. I just got to have you make more mistakes than me, right? We're in the gym and we're doing handstand push-ups, right? If I just get you to think about your too much blood pressure going to your head and it's uncomfortable, you're probably not going to do as many as your best, right? So if I can get you to screw up or, make a mistake, then, another way to use it, the psychology in that part. Does that kind of answer your question? And kind of taking a look at that is you've got your unconscious wanting to keep you safe. So then now how do we begin to take those two things and begin to look at the outcome that we want and begin to build it that way, like I did with Khedivas, and begin to utilize that, as one of the alternatives.
Yeah, absolutely. Does make sense. Do you notice that there's better results like utilizing that anxiety versus getting rid of it completely, or does it just depend on the person?
I'm going to say it depends on the person, but then people, I always, when I have clients working with me, I like in part of our session before I actually, create a custom recording for them, similar to what you listened to, what I shared, and I can share with your audience, is we're working on the strategy. I kind of call it, the lab. If it was, if we were in the office still, it would be, this is our lab. We're building things, a lot of younger athletes or a lot of gamers, it's like building your avatar and, helping people think that, in their mind, there's a computer screen, there's dials, there's gauges, there's buttons and stuff. And if we were to, dial in the equipment, just like you would if you were playing, a shooter game, and, Fortnite or I'm trying to remember, the different ones that are out there, you can tweak your avatar to do certain things. You know what I mean? It's faster, stronger, quicker. You've got a sniper versus, some other type of handgun, just it has a scope on it. And you can begin to dial that in. So I want to make it so that when I'm, we're kind of building, we're going to take and think about knocking over the first domino, and that gives you your confidence back and you start to begin to solve this. And I expect things to work very quickly. And then I expect them not to work. Okay. Because it's just part of your human nature then, is that once I got your brain thinking like this, it should be able to help start thinking of solving it. You know what I mean? And kind of understand like, hey, this one's not going to be done the same way as the other one. So now how do I use the same technology that Todd's introduced me to take care of that? Right.
Okay.
And it just might be a different situation. I mean, you've gone and you've competed before, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So you've been to different boxes and, or different places. And you probably, if you've been there more than once, some of them will be more favorite. And then there's other ones that I don't seem to do as well here. Right. You know what I mean? The rope seems to be, slipperier versus, this one, I'm like a spider on it. You know what I mean? Then if you let that stick around, it becomes a head game. And then, now you're expecting to be slower, you're expecting to be stronger. It's just kind of taking that advantage and putting it to use.
So when you're talking about the different techniques you're working with your athletes or any of your performers, are we like changing thought patterns? Are we changing the subconscious and how it kind of functions? Like what's happening on a neural or brain level when working with some of these techniques?
So yes. Let's step back and let's explain, to your audience here. So I'm going to point to my right palm here. So if this is your conscious mind, this is your unconscious mind, right? Mm-hmm. So as an example, so your conscious mind can handle 1 to 9 things at any one time. I usually say women on the higher end, guys on the lower end. This is your analytical, your critical thinking, and your willpower. All right.
Okay.
So this is your part of your brain, the critic. It says like, what the heck? You're stupid. You're dumb. This is the part that beats you up. All right. Is the main part of your critic. All right. Your willpower we'll talk about in a second. Now, how many things do you think go on in your unconscious or your subconscious?
A lot, constantly.
Give me a number. There's 1 to 9 over here. Give me a number over here.
900.
You're too low.
Too low? 5,000?
You're still too low.
Really? 10,000?
You're way too low.
Million?
Now you're getting warm. Keep going.
10 million.
Little more. So, I mean, they say 2.3 million things per second go on in your unconscious. Habits, instincts, memories, emotion. This is what's going on over here, right? So you're not thinking about how your head tilted to one side. You touched your chin. You're breathing. You've got the smile going on, your voice tonality, you're making sure your heart's beating properly, you're getting enough oxygen and everything that's happening. So many things are going on in your head besides you wanting to, do your, get a deadlift with the cleanest technique or, a squat or something, coming out of the hole, on a weight or, just kind of thinking in some of the things I know that you like to play in. So when you think about it, so your question was, is it in your head or is it in your unconscious? So when your brain, the way it works is that, when you were, let's say, 8 years or younger, we really didn't have a conscious mind in the development. Everything was, totally really unconscious, which is why when you watch younger kids, you can teach them multiple languages. They're kind of really creative. In some place where, the way our school system works, we kind of shut that down way too much, that force that comes in. So now all of a sudden the conscious comes in. And if you think about how we learn stuff and how the common mentality, even in, CrossFit, is that it's repetition, right? So now the learning is repetition. So the question is that when we're doing the repetition, are we doing it correctly? Right? Mm-hmm. Perfect practice makes, perfect results. But how often our practice is not perfect, right? So we build what we call bad habits. You know what I mean? Yeah. And, there's a term that's kind of out there for a long time called muscle memory. I'm not really sure that that's really accurate. What you're doing is you're doing enough repetition so that it becomes more of an automatic process and the muscle really having a memory in itself, but you're being able to repeat the routine, that way without thinking it. So if you think of, even a squat, and I can't really compare that next to a golf swing, but, a number of the golf pros that I work with their students in this area, and I've worked with a lot of them myself, is that they'll tell me that there's at least 100 micro movements from where you're standing on the ball, taking your club to the backswing all the way through, to the follow through. I got to imagine there's probably, if we were to analyze, just, a deadlift or a squat or something, some of the, the techniques that you would do in, CrossFit, that there's too many movements and you can consciously, tell yourself, to do, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you're thinking about it, if you're doing a deadlift, I got to grip it, I got to bend down, I got to keep my arms straight, I got to, get lower, I got to pull with my legs, I got to get up so far, then I've got to, lean back. You can't talk yourself through it, right? You know what I mean? So your conscious mind can't handle that. so what you want to be able to do is you want to download that over here and being able to repeat it.
Okay.
So we'll come back to this in the way hypnosis and mindfulness kind of works in between here in a second. But if you see some of the studies, I think like the University of Indiana is one of them that did, and they took, basketball free throw shooters, and they took one group and they let them practice throwing, as many free throws per day for a week. And then they took a second group and all they did is sat them down and they mentally took them through, the exact motion of, rolling the ball off their fingers, seeing the arc in the net, bringing it back, this way, right? But they were doing every shot perfect. So even the best free throwers in the NBA, shoot probably about 90%, which still means they missed 10, right? Mm-hmm. Out of 100, so, but the question is do those 10 come up 1 out of 10 or all 10 at once, right? You know what I mean? You might shoot 90 of them straight and then like, hey, I'm shooting 100. Then all of a sudden, you miss 10. So, the question is, is which one's going to work? And repeatedly, when you've done this test, and I've done this when I'm with the basketball team, because it's a really quick and easy, test to do, is a lot of people go out and shoot 100 free throws, get a baseline, let them sit down now. Let me work, 30 minutes with a, hypnotic or, live or, mindfulness, presentation to their brain with their eyes closed, have them go out. And I consistently see from about a 2% minimum to, I've seen 20, 25% improvement, in just, 15, 20 minutes. But what I'm doing is I'm taking away the mistakes, I'm making them see it in their mind and feeling it in their mind of being able to let that ball roll off, hit that arc and go in. And so what we're doing there is we're really retraining the brain how to do it perfectly. And what ends up happening, so how this works is that between the conscious and the unconscious, when we're working with hypnosis, one of the key things is that people have is that they're stressed, they're worried, they're anxious. And we'll talk about how that fits in. But when we're in a relaxed state, we go from alpha down to theta, even, delta, we take the brain waves down. What we're slowing it down. So we're relaxing the body and then we're focusing the mind. So we want to relax the body first. We want to focus the mind second. The third part in this part is we're putting in new instructions. So this is where when I'm working with a client, you're telling me the technique. I may know it because I've worked with 100 other people like yourself, but I want you to tell me what you want. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. How is your coach and how is your trainers working with you so that I can weave that back in? So now we got relaxed, we got focus, we got new instructions. And what we do is we create this super learning state in your brain. And so just like when we'll talk about you listening to that, Stress to Calm recording, for 20 minutes, you weren't really thinking about anything, right? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You were just in my world, in my voice and, everything that I was saying. And whatever was going on was very low, if not, out of the picture. So the same thing's happening here. So if we're talking about you doing better deadlifts or, squats or, runs or whatever you're doing, we've built this in the whole program. And, in that time period, you've encapsulated your brain, in your body and your mind so that you're seeing, hearing it in a relaxed way and you're doing it perfectly. Okay. And you're getting the full neurology of, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, even smell and taste if it was appropriate for that happening. So I've had, things, people that have smoked 5 packs of cigarettes stop in, as fast as one session. Habits that people would say are very addictive, and you can get some very rapid change, to begin to do that. But you're really helping people, do several things at one time. And as they begin to flow with it, they get a compound benefit, of relaxation, which is the opposite of stress. You've got the ability to learn to focus instead of, being all over the place, in this world. And, then being real, to super learn this new instruction. And really, this is where you get to the power of it in using what I kind of do with my athletes versus just strictly a coach. Not because a coach is talking to the conscious part of the mind. And, again, if they can get that there, and from there you can transfer it over here, it works well. The problem is that most people got too much noise going on over here and so many bad beliefs that it never really gets over here. And they constantly hit like what I call the F it button, and they just check out. They hit the F it button and just like give up. So if we can, we use the technology of all this together and, enhancing it in a kind of place from that standpoint. Does that make sense? And kind of.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I feel like I needed you in my world like 3 or 4 years ago. Ring muscle ups have been my CrossFit nemesis movement for about 6 years. And finally, as of like a couple of weeks ago, I'm finally getting that turnover. But I know like I was just stuck in bad movement patterns for so long from doing so many like failed attempts. And it just like took like that long for me to overcome it. So I feel like I needed you in my life a while ago.
I'll give you a little different example. Like when my wife was a manager of a club and they had a CrossFit, box that someone was renting in there, and set it up. So I was kind of there. And I remember we were doing, where you're running and then you're deadlifting and, there's this compound, action. And it was one of those 6 a.m. and my legs were just not having it. I was just, probably like wearing cement shoes. But what I found that really helped me was they had birthday parties that they would do in this sports club, right? Because it was a full thing. And there was one helium balloon that had, just enough air that was floating. And I would do this with sprinters, right? That are track and field people. Is what I would imagine for them to do well is I would imagine when they're in the start is imagine a spring that was you stretched all the way back so that when that thing went, the spring like just, pulled you all the way across that finish, and saw some great results with people getting, their lowest times. So I took that while I'm running around this, they had a soccer, indoor hockey, thing. I'm running around. I'm imagining that I'm tying this balloon to my waist. And this helium is just making me float and I'm getting lighter as opposed to, when you're running and you're dog tired, your leg, you just like plotting. And all of a sudden I felt like I was floating and, and I was able, there was a time and I was able to pick up time and pass people. And it was just a change of mentality. I just used like, what was there and it was in that same idea. So I would think, one of the things in those muscle ups to help you out would be to think about being lighter, lighter and stronger, right? Mm-hmm. Because, if you were lighter, then it would be that much easier, yeah. Right?
I like it.
So, kind of using that same idea, to have some fun with it. And, I've done that, the balloons I've done quite a bit, especially with, marathoners or, triathletes or biathletes or something, and they run. And at some point when you're hitting that wall, you go, when they talk about having a runner's high is really, they're just kind of going, they're shutting the noise off of their conscious mind, and they're just in an altered state. And, and all you're doing is really taking advantage of these altered states to, perform your very best.
Yeah, that's awesome. I will definitely have to play with that later this week. So let's switch directions just a little bit. We've talked about performance some. Let's talk about injury. More specifically, like it can be very scary for athletes who have gone through any sort of injury, whether it's traumatic or non-traumatic, to get back to that activity and test it out again. And I know you do a lot with like helping them kind of break some of those hurdles down. So let's talk about that a little bit as far as like, what can we do when we're just stuck in that, like scared to test things again?
So let's go back to one of our first things we talked about is what do you want, right? Mm-hmm. So I want my body, strong, flexible, whatever those characteristics are, you know what I mean? Quicker, faster, stronger, probably the 3 that, roll off my tongue, that are there. And, it's sort of like, I don't know about your parents, but, my mom's in her 80s and she's going like, hey, Todd, you're not as young as you used to be, and, kind of giving me And I go, yeah, I'm just getting younger. I'm just reversing the age and I'm getting better. I'm getting stronger, more flexible. And that's what, I do. I grew up ski racing, and now I've gone through, been an instructor, a ski coach and stuff. And now I'm helping out with Special Olympics, skiers and ski racers. But, I happened to be driving to the mountain the other day, and I talked to my mom. She's going, yeah, well, just don't fall and hurt yourself. And I'm going like, no, I'm going to stay on my skis and have fun. You know what I mean? And it's really, that's really coming from an injury standpoint is let's come back in how do I want my leg? So if you could go back to the 80s and pull up some reruns of Lee Majors and the Bionic Man, right? Let's build them better. I mean, and literally as corny as it is, it's really kind of the fundamentals of what you want to start to think about. If I had some surgery, whether, whatever it is that, hey, they made me better, they made me quicker, they made me stronger, and now the question is going out and beginning to, move through it and get comfortable again. And because there is going to be a part, again, there's one part of your head that does protect you, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but you've seen people who've come back from injuries and done extremely well. So if they can do it, then I believe you can do it. That's how if it's happened in one place, then it'll happen someplace else. And that's really, it's kind of helping people with doubt and fear. Mm-hmm. And how that kind of plays in. Let me give you a little idea of the technology behind it. So we can only be here at 7:38, right now. Is if you talk about, mindfulness, you're hearing everyone talks about being in the moment, right? Mm-hmm. But yep. we've got two parts. We got Brienne, from her memory, right? From now, back to her birth. And so there's Brienne who's done things successfully, who's done things really well. Then there's Betty. All right. Betty's your alter ego that has all the guilt, remorse, failure, unforgetfulness, whatever that's there. So the question is like, when we're going to do this now, is it Brienne or is it Betty showing up?
Okay.
That's number one. So the Bettys that we keep around act like a boat anchor. This is why people talk about dragging their past. Literally, it's a boat anchor, right? Now, when we look here that from other than this moment, now we've got our imagination, okay? Our imagination has two parts. The first part I talk about is worry, anxiety, and fear, okay? Because this is what people do. They go out slightly into the future, your clients with injuries, right? Mm-hmm. And they're running one of these patterns. Now, technically, they're three different things, but in my book, they all kind of do the same thing. You're going into the future, whether it's in a moment or a year or whatever, and you're making a bad movie, right? You're making a bad movie of, whatever the injury happened again, you can't do it, whatever, it's sore, or you have arthritis, I don't know, you had to have it amputated, whatever crazy thoughts you get in your head over, that's probably not going to ever happen. And you bring those back to, the moment. So we're here right here. And you bring those things back because, again, you're thinking about what you don't want instead of you want, right? Mm-hmm. And then you've got this boat anchor of, Betty on the other side because you're remembering something of the past, right? Mm-hmm. And this is why people get stuck.
Okay.
All right. And what they don't realize is that, these chains can be cut and these are temporary walls, but no one's ever taught you that you can move the wall. You can move those thoughts out. So what I end up doing here is really to help them come up with a 2.0 version of them. So similar to you with your muscle ups is that, hey, that was, Brienne 101. Now we're at Brienne 102 or 2.0 or whatever it is, or, 2.3 is, you get to a new level with it. And that's the part that we have to begin to create and install so that you can begin to, figure out, I don't really care why they're there, but you got to figure out what are we doing with, getting those out of the way so that you can get that 2.0 you that going. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
And really coming back to what, hypnosis and mindfulness does versus that is that this all makes logical sense, right? But it's like, you've got the angel and you got the devil on your shoulders, in that classic thing, and they're both talking in your ears. And which one are you listening to? Mm-hmm. Right? We talk about the wolf inside, like, if you keep feeding the wolf, you act that way, you starve the wolf, you don't. I mean, it's really the same idea in a sense, is that but the question then is that how do you do it, and how do you do it repeatably, so that you can move, in a succession to get to your destinations. Mm-hmm. Is that so? That's the structure that's in there with every injury is to put in, people's, not only, physically what they want, but then even talking to people's bodies. I mean, there's other specialists that I've been around that, that have worked around people with cancer and some really, serious diseases. And, they saw massive improvements in their health, again, by changing their thoughts. And beginning to see that your immune system, your healing properties begin to work efficiently, in the belief that's there. Because you can believe you can believe you can't, and your body's going to listen to you no matter what. So why not begin to, take everything the medical community is going to do physically, and then begin to put it, on, up front, which is why, like, one of the women that works with me, Pat, she had all her dental work. I taught her, some pain control. She did it with all Novocaine.
Oh, dang.
One of my teachers had his knee scoped with no Novocaine, or no, anesthetics. Anesthesia, I should say.
Yeah.
Get my words right here. So, there's different ways that you can use the brain to turn some of that off. And, if you go back to the 1940s, 1950s, a lot of the dentists were trained with those techniques because they didn't have Novocaine at the time, to administer. And they were doing some, pulling teeth and cavities. And so, there's some pretty effective ways of using your brain to, take care of a number of those areas. So, so to come back around, with some of those, stories in building this, is that, for the people with injury would be to really help them build, what they want, and then to begin to mentally take them through their body actually doing it.
Okay.
From even if they were like permanently in a cast, but they would, I've had people, that way that we were working together, they would begin to feel, imagine what it would feel like as if, they had free move, their arm or their leg was actually doing that motion. Mm-hmm. And, it's the same way with, some, I know CrossFit isn't, so much in the bodybuilding and things like that, but, just those strength motions is that I've had people, just beginning to mentally move, imagine that they were doing that weight, even though they were injured, and they were beginning to, bring everything through the neurology and strengthen the muscles and the tendons and get things to flow and, to move that in that process.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. You mentioned a couple times, and we will definitely share it with the listeners, the stress to calm audio. It made me, it really seemed to me all very similar to some guided meditations that I've done. So it really got me wondering, like, what's the difference, or maybe there isn't a whole lot of difference, with what happens with the brain when it comes to like guided to meditation versus hypnosis and how all that works.
So classically, they're really going to be, if we were to put an EKG on the brain, people that meditate in, a hypnotic state, you're going to come from a waking state, beta, alpha, theta, delta. You'd be able to do that. So like I have a Muse headset, I have Heart Math. I'm kind of always like playing with some of the technology so that I could show people some more empirical data, with it on a graph so that they would see that process. But your brain would kind of go through that way. Typically with meditation, you're emptying the mind to relax the body. Okay. And meditation is really kind of what you're doing it, whether it's guided, or you're just sitting there, being quiet and trying to meditate, which is what most people think of meditation. is that quiet, and there's too much noise going on in your brain of your internal self-talk or, self BS, that you never kind of feel like you get there, right? So the opposite here is that I relax the body to focus the mind. And then I had an outcome on there. So, which isn't typically the way, a guided meditation is typically designed, that way. And that's why I find, I think they're both effective. I just find that, coming at it with the way I do it, relaxing, focusing, putting the instructions, in there, help people take that. Because I really don't care if we had an EKG on and you got your, your brain wave from a 40 hertz down to a 13 hertz, right? Doesn't really matter in my mind. I mean, unless we were trying to get you down to, there's ultra depths where you want people down to 3 hertz or something. There's people that do and test for that. You're not running around with a muse on your head and, or some EKG there. So the question really is how do we redirect your thoughts in the most effective way that you can begin to see, hear, and feel, so you can repeat that process to do what you want to do? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's, I'm not really kind of looking to create someone with a feeling. Someone goes, well, I don't feel hypnotized. Okay. I didn't say you didn't come in to be hypnotized. Like when I do entertainment hypnosis, where you come up on a stage and, I get you to bark like a dog, or, bark like a duck, or sing like a dog or something. If you go on my website, you'll see I was on a radio show interview, and, the classic one where I got the person to forget their name. Right. And, and it didn't take me that long to do that with them. And he couldn't remember his name. Or, the classic one is count your fingers, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. You know what I mean? That you're going to forget the number 3. And, people kind of think about it and they go, well, what's the purpose of, getting people to forget a number, right? Well, why not learn how to forget your mistake? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, your muscle ups, right? If your coach is telling you, Brianne, like you keep doing the thing I'm telling you not to do. Well, what if we could just cut it out and throw it away? You know what I mean? And then you'd probably get past that sticking point, right?
Probably.
I mean? So, I kind of look at it as it's just, working with so many different people, it's kind of like, hey, this is kind of like a fun puzzle or game, or, I look at it like computer programming is like, what's the code that God built into you, because God wired you unique. And how do I take what, that code is, and how do we, build it and do better with it?
Yeah.
Is that making, so, I mean, I really think they're similar. What I think happens a little bit more is that, since what I'm doing is a little bit more personalized than just a guided imagery, I think it allows people to flow a little bit easier than that part. And really, it's the belief. Do I believe I can, or I believe I can't? And in that stress to calm, when your audience gets a chance to listen to it, I then anchor in there the word calm, right? So as you listen to that multiple times, it's going to be a new trigger word. So the state that you've kind of gotten yourself in, that relaxed, focused state of calm, now you've got an auditory trigger, right? So we can build these triggers when we're thinking about this, and this comes from neurolinguistic psychology, is that, we could create visual triggers, auditory triggers, kinesthetic triggers, touch, smell and taste. So that when certain things happen, you immediately, slip into the, state that you want to get into, of performance or power or quickness or something like that. Which, when you come back to this topic of injury, is, when somebody, kind of gets a twinge, if your shoulder, has got that sticking spot, the twinge. Now you could either feel that and go, oh, or like, oh, okay, I'm getting stronger, I'm getting better, it's getting looser. You know what I mean? And, it's this part's just part of my healing. You know what I mean? And, and it's getting better. You know what I mean? It's really kind of what you're giving energy to in that process. But that's something generally that has to be taught than it is the first thought that's going to come out of your brain and your mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, all that definitely made sense. And I can definitely relate to, especially when you're saying like the computer program, everyone's a little bit different, just because I'm the same way with my coaching. It's like everyone's, and even me personally, like everyone responds to different cues when it comes to improving technique or changing things. It's like, it's why we just kind of like have this toolbox in our head of hundreds of different ways to word things.
Right. And in that, and being able to give people those cues, with their anchors or triggers, is once they understand them, it's like the light switch. You know what I mean? Is that you begin to, it could be strictly on or off, but if you think about it, if you have a dimmer switch, right, is what's the intensity that we want, or what's, how do I control that energy or that vocal tone or, that power in what we're doing?
Yeah, definitely.
So you think about like what I mentioned is like coming back to that gamer and an avatar is when you're building this with people, is that some people really enjoy it because I kind of create this room. It's kind of like their computer room. And when we're talking about those things, so let's say speed, we want that up, we want power up, we want fear down, we want, springs in the legs, we want, different things, and begin to adjust. And some will be dot knobs, some will be sliders, some will be buttons, and what they're, and imagine that you're seeing this, 50-inch LCD screen in front, and it's your body, and you're actually, you're kind of testing it and seeing yourself move and perform that way. They're going like, oh, wow, I can actually begin to do that. And then, so it's the things you're talking about are cues, are then beginning to build that in such a way that they become an internal trigger. So they've already seen it, practiced it, and then taking it out onto the, the field, the court, the gym, whatever the surfaces that they're playing on, and being able to implement.
Yeah. Awesome. I like that visual too of the, like increasing the power, decreasing the fear, and just like those little switches. And it's a good visual.
Yeah, it can be really powerful, with people because they don't realize they can have much more control. They think it's magical, and it is magical when you get it to work, but it's something that they can get at. It's similar to watching, kind of reminds me of Harry Potter when they play Quidditch, and they're chasing around that little dragonfly ball or whatever, and they're just kind of grabbing it, air or whatever, trying to get it, but you're grabbing it, you know what I mean? And then, you're bringing it inside and you're making it yours, you're making it work. And that's really
awesome. Well, kind of start closing things out. You are a wealth of knowledge. We talked about a ton of things today. Is there any, what are just kind of one or two quick little, not say takeaways, but just things that someone can implement to just kind of help them perform in whatever they might be struggling in right now?
So we've talked about it twice before. I'll bring it up one last time. So it's really to take that, what do you want? You know what I mean?
Awesome. I like it.
I mean, it's really that's really kind of the start of it. If you think about, your brain, there's a strategy that I've learned that I use in business. And, this is called the format system. Why, what, how, what, if. I'm assuming already that my clients kind of know why they're doing what they're doing, right? Mm-hmm. So they're already kind of bought in. There's 40% of their neurology that's already gone. That leaves another 70. So, if 40% is answering the why question, you've got probably 30%, on the what question. Then between the how and the what if becomes, the implementation, and the what if is how you future pace against, those thoughts, which is sort of, the injury recovery. But the what is where I find most people, why I love, CrossFit, I love baseball, I love golf, I love gymnastics or whatever. So that's my why. I want to get better. What is it now I'm thinking about? And this is where a lot of people are thinking, about the wrong thing. You know what I mean? They're thinking about their failure, making a mistake, muscling up, hitting their head on the bar, cracking their teeth, falling off, spraining their, I mean, I've never seen anybody do any of those things, but in their brain, they're doing it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And, so it just helps your body keep you off that bar and, getting up above it.
Yeah. Awesome.
So I think really that's kind of the beginning of it. When you begin to think about that, it really can help clarify, from a visual, auditory, kinesthetic type of way, however you're wired, and give you that ability to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. I love it. Well, awesome. Well, Todd, if anyone has more questions for you, wants to reach out to you or just learn more about you, where can they find you?
So if you go on the web at phillyhypnosis.com, PHILLY, hypnosis, HYPNOSIS.com, you'll find my website. And you feel free to give me a call at 215-696-1267.
Awesome. And we will put the link to the website as well as the Stress to Calm audio that we talked about in the show notes.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Todd. I greatly appreciate it.
Brianne, thank you for the opportunity. I hope it's been beneficial. And if I can be any more of assistance, just call me back up.
Will do.
All right. Thanks again.